Wondering what new Ashes of Outland deck you should play to climb the ladder, maybe even hit Legend? Well, the data is in, the early meta is starting to settle, and I've got some ideas.
Hey, buddy, watch this.
That's right, now that we're in the post-Nerf era, Demon Hunter has lost a little strength. We're starting to see decks solidifying near the top of the meta, and HS Replay has gathered, of course, all of the different decks here across the multiple tiers. Specifically behind me, you'll see this deck scrolling, and that's from the last 1 day. So we get the most up-to-date data, and from ranks Diamond through Legend. So we see people who are playing these decks at the highest expressions of their power level. And by taking a look at this, we can see which new decks are the ones that are really going to be the most viable options to climb. Now, for this video, I specifically want to focus on new decks, and unfortunately, there are a few old decks still clinging on to the top of the meta here. So we're going to go ahead and get rid of Galakrond Warlock. It's gone. We're going to get rid of Highlander Mage. It's gone. And we're going to get rid of Highlander Hunter. It's gone. Now, clearly those have changed since they're pre-Ashes of Outland iterations, but they only have a handful of new Ashes of Outland cards, in some cases like 1 or 2. And I don't think they're distinct enough or new enough to really be called new in this meta. So I'm going to focus on decks that have a much higher utilization of Ashes of Outland cards or some kind of totally new archetype. I should note before we get into this, we are going to be looking at the archetypal views for these decks, not individual deck lists. If you're looking for the highest win rate deck of each of these archetypes we discuss, you can check the description below for those deck lists. So don't be alarmed if you only see one of a card as we move forward. That might not mean much. The official deck list is down below. And for our best new deck, it's actually still Tempo Demon Hunter. Of course, Galakrond Warlock takes that overall #1 spot, but this is the best thing you can play if you're looking for something fresh and different. And although this did get nerfed a ton and it got much weaker, it's still right there at the tier 1 spot. It turns out there's a lot of great cards in Demon Hunter, and when you kind of just pick the best ones and try to play them on curve, things go really, really well, creating lots of pressure and overwhelming your opponents with just high quality cards. Imprisoned Antian and Priestess of Fury in particular, topping out this curve, can really help you secure victories. You've also got really powerful mid-game plays like Glavebound Adept and Kane Sunfury to keep the pressure pushing. Really strong early game openers with Battle Fiend. It's amazing. Umberwing is fantastic. Furious Felfin does some work too, so you can get things rolling. And you basically just try to play things on curve, trade very efficiently when possible, or remove your opponent's stuff via weapons or things like I-Beam or Altruist with extreme efficiency, and then overwhelm them with just mid-game minions that they cannot keep up with and the pressure that eventually gets there, and sometimes utilizing burst damage from cards like Chaos Strike, Twin Slice, or your weapons to go over the top and kill them. Even Glavebound Adept can chip in there, and Metamorphosis is certainly your best option as a finisher tool as well. So all in all, you could call this tempo. I think you could call this a mid-range deck. You could probably even get away with calling this an aggro deck in some ways. But all in all, it's just the high-pressure version of Demon Hunter that seems like it's going to be the one that works because the card quality is just so darn high, and it's still a great deck to climb. Moving on here is Galakrond Secret Rogue. And this is admittedly one I almost didn't include in this video. I think it's very debatable how new this deck is because it is mostly still Galakrond Rogue at its core, but I think the new secret package is important enough and distinct enough that it still deserves to be included. That's Blackjack Stunner, Bamboozle, Ambush, Dirty Tricks, the 3 secrets, and Shadow Jeweler Hanar, which can really help sync all that up together. Secrets are just nice, cheap plays, and they're all pretty good at giving you something relevant on board. I've been pleasantly surprised by Ambush. I think Bamboozle makes a lot of sense with the powerful turn 1 openers, and the real reason to run Secrets is just that Blackjack Stunner is a ridiculously good both early game tempo card, but also can do some magical things late as a sap on a stick that's even cheaper. That's crazy strong. And then, of course, you've just got the Galakrond Rogue package, which we've already seen succeed a ton, cheating out all kinds of free cards via Galakrond, and Heistbear and Togwaggle's Wand are both incredible plays, giving you those big late game Edwins, tempo swings with Blackjack Stunner, crazy value generation off Shadow Jeweler Hanar, and free secrets. You can kind of do it all in this deck, creating lots of tempo, enormous swings, turns where you basically can scam the game from your opponent, as many people say. So pretty familiar list, but nonetheless, with that secret package, that's quite a few new cards added in here. So I still wanted to give this one a little bit of love. So our third best new deck is Spell Druid, crazy new archetype. This one's not even really very familiar, utilizing Kael'thas, Sunstrider, and the new, I would call them kind of baby Omega cards of Iron Bark and Bog Beam that go to 0 mana once you've gotten to 7 overall mana crystals, in combination to give you lots of 0 mana spells. So you've got Innervates and both of those, and many other cheap spells, as you can see as well. Crystal Power, Power of the Wild, Rising Winds, Wrath, Fungal Fortunes, etc., to create scenarios where you play Kael'thas, you play a ton of cheap spells, and you cheat out your big spells here, the Forest Aid, Gift of the Wild, Force of Nature, Overflow, in order to create some enormous board swings on those powerful Kael'thas turns while also just drawing tons of stuff. So you can end up with a Kael'thas, a big Forest Aid board that's been buffed by Gift of the Wild. You can draw 10 cards in the meantime and just overwhelm your opponent with so much stuff, and it's survivable thanks to Soul of the Forest. They can't clear that crazy board, and then you just Savage Roar them down for lethal, creating all kinds of like one-turn win conditions, basically, while comboing and chaining off of Kael'thas. If for some reason that doesn't work, this deck can still just generate a lot of reloads in a token druid style. Just playing, you know, multiple Forest Aids means you're going to have a lot of boards that might eventually stick, overwhelm your opponent, and just enable you to win kind of via traditional token druid paths as well. So a really cool list that's pretty fun to play, I have to say. Kind of feels problematic sometimes because Kael'thas can just go so nuts in a single turn. That's not very fun to watch when your opponent does it, but if you're playing it yourself, it's a very rewarding deck and certainly a competitively viable one as well. So a pretty nifty new archetype. So next up here at the number 4 spot is Zoo Warlock. And I know what you're thinking, wait, Regis, Zoo Warlock's not new, bro. That's been around forever. And you're right, but I think this one is distinct enough in Ashes of Outland that it deserved a new status, namely because of the card Imprisoned Scrap Imp, which is really changing the shape of Zoo. Before I get into that, though, this archetypal view from HS Replay does kind of combine two distinct lists of Zoo right now. There is a build popularized by the Grandmaster player Galen, which includes the Imprisoned Scrap Imp buffs with a lot of crazy cards like Stone Tusk Boar and Shield Bearer and Argent Squire. These 1-drops we might not traditionally see in Zoo, typically wouldn't have been good enough to make the cut in the past, but in combination with Imprisoned Scrap Imp, you get a big board of 1-drops, you go off with a Magic Carpet, and you can make these just enormous turns. You clear your opponent's entire board because you got all these crazy Magic Carpet Rush minions. You just play a big handful of stuff. So it has these kind of mid-game swings as opposed to as reliable of an on-curve consistency that normal Zoo would have had. Alternatively, we have this kind of dark glare Zoo that's forming that plays a little bit more traditionally on tempo, doesn't rely on the kind of shenanigans of Imprisoned Scrap Imp as heavily, and instead can cheat mana via Dark Glare and damaging itself as well. So I'm going to include examples of both of those lists in the description below. You can certainly take a look and see which one you prefer. One unifying element here across both is that Nightshade Matron and Hand of Gul'dan are serving as a pretty cool reload tool for Zoo, where you get this nice 4-mana minion that's a 5/5 with Rush, takes great trades, and then Hand of Gul'dan can draw you a lot of cards, which also means Expired Merchant is making its way into these deck lists, which can either serve as card draw via Hand of Gul'dan, or sometimes a little bit of extra value generation, adding a couple cards back while still developing a 2-drop minion. But all in all, because of all these different angles and new cards that are sort of the engines for both of these Zoo decks, I think it's a new way to play Zoo. It's actually a really fun way to play Zoo in both cases, I think, and a really reliable way to climb, of course. And then finally here, our 5th best new deck is actually Highlander Priest. What? That one's a little bit of a shocker here for me. Now, we had already seen some Highlander Priest previously. It was decent. It wasn't super high tier. But in this case, a lot of new Ashes of Outland cards are really increasing the power level, I think, of Highlander Priest. So just running through this really quickly, you can see Reliquary of Souls, Dragonmaw Sentinel, Sethic Veilweaver, Apotheosis. We got Shadowward Ruin and Natalie Celine and some of the Priest rework cards. Thoughtseal as well, not exactly new with Ashes of Outland, but still feeling pretty new. Skeletal Dragon, Soul Mirror. You've got Renew, Imprisoned Homunculus, Probably some that I missed, but basically a lot of new cards here that are increasing the consistency because you only get to run one of each of these. You need a lot of good options, and finally Priest has some more reliable stuff. I think especially some early tempo cards like Imprisoned Homunculus get that nice taunt down. Some value generating cards as well with the new cheaper Thoughtsteel, Sapphic Veil Weaver, Reliquary of Souls gives you this big bomb. You've still got the late game dominance of Priest down there with things like Plague of Death. Murazon can be a pretty big swing turn. Now Skeletal Dragon gives you a lot of value. So essentially a deck that can kind of do a little bit of everything. It can get off to quick starts. It has that typical Zephrys, Dragon Queen, Electra has a power strikes. Has a lot of value generation and like sort of Thief Burgle style stuff to generate even more resources and use your opponent's deck against them. Really efficient removal with Shadow Word Pain or Shadow Word Death. Big board clears. It just does a little bit of everything. And I personally love decks like this, particularly that has a Thief Priest vibe with Thoughtsteel. So this is a deck I'm going to be taking a closer look at and probably playing a little bit more myself when I'm climbing off stream, especially because I still need to get to 1,000 Priest wins. My only class that's a little bit short. But really fun deck, surprisingly competitive. And I think not the terrible way to play Priest that is Res Priest. I hate Res Priest personally, at least. So for me, a healthier alternative for a class that has flown a little bit under the radar lately. So a really, really cool deck to see here. And that wraps it up for this video, the 5 best new decks. Again, a reminder, deck list in the description below. These were just archetypal views of the cards themselves. If you want the refined list, you're going to need 2 ofs and so on and so forth, so check below. This will certainly change and update over time as well. It's not usually a completely finished meta just a few days after a given nerf or even within a week of an expansion release. So still be careful when you're making crafting decisions and dusting stuff. Things might surprise you. Things could crop up that totally reshape how this looks. But if you've got some spare dust, if you've got a lot of these cards laying around, these are some good lists right now to help you get going in Ashes of Outland. And I'm sure they'll stay at least somewhat relevant, if not necessarily at the top of the meta. And don't forget, we did throw out some decks too, so if you're really looking to win, it seems like Galakrond Warlock is still your best bet right now. That said, if you guys have some cool deck lists you think will break the meta, feel free to share those in the descriptions below for other people to check out. If you hate one of these lists or love it, share your thoughts on why as well. But until then, thanks so much for watching, and until next time, game on.